People like you belong outside, not in a VIP lounge. Touch one thing, old man, and you're going to jail.
The security manager grabbed my arm in front of everyone and said, "People like you don't belong in places like this." The VIP guests laughed. One woman covered her purse. Another man whispered that someone should check my pockets before I disappeared. I lowered my head and said nothing, because I needed them to believe I was powerless. Then a young security guard slipped a coffee cup into my hand. Under the lid was a note. "Don't sign anything. They planted the watch." That was the moment I stopped pretending to be weak. The first thing I noticed in the video was not the security guard's hand on the old man's shoulder. It was the laughter. Soft, polished, expensive laughter. The kind people make when they are sure the person being humiliated has no power to answer back. I sat alone in my office on the 46th floor of Whitmore Aviation Group's headquarters, watching the footage for the third time. Outside my window, Dallas glittered beneath the evening sky. Inside, the screen showed Harrington Executive Terminal, the newest private airport my company had acquired in Texas. It was supposed to be a sanctuary for travelers. Quiet lounges, private boarding gates, white glove service. A place where every person who walked through the door was treated with dignity. Instead, I watched a man in worn clothes being shoved toward the exit while wealthy passengers in the VIP lounge smiled over their glasses of champagne. The anonymous envelope had arrived that morning. No name, no return address. Just a flash drive and a folded note. "Mr. Whitmore, your terminal is beautiful from the outside. You should see what happens inside. My name is Edward Whitmore. I am 62 years old, founder of Whitmore Aviation Group, and owner of one of the most exclusive private airport networks in America. People call me disciplined, cold, untouchable. They see the tailored suits, the private jets, the boardrooms, and they assume I was born above everyone else. They are wrong. I was born in a one-bedroom apartment outside Tulsa. My mother, Ruth Whitmore, was a quiet, stubborn woman with tired hands and a heart too proud to beg. When I was 12, she tried to take me through a bus terminal during a freezing storm. We had no ticket yet. She only wanted to get us inside where it was warm. A guard threw us out. I still remember her standing in the snow, holding my hand, pretending she was not crying. That memory built my company more than money ever did. A soft knock came at my office door. Claire Bennett stepped in, holding a folder against her chest. Claire was my executive assistant, 41, sharp-eyed, composed, and usually 3 steps ahead of everyone around her. She had worked beside me for 14 years and had earned the right to question me when others were too afraid. "You watched it again," she said. "I did. And you're still thinking of going there yourself." "I'm not thinking about it, Claire." Her face tightened. "Edward, send auditors, send legal, send a trained investigator." I stood and walked toward the closet hidden behind the walnut paneling. Inside, behind rows of dark suits, hung an old gray janitor's uniform I had ordered the night before. Faded shirt, worn pants, cheap rubber gloves. A name patch stitched across the chest. Eddie. Claire stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. I picked up the uniform. Auditors see paperwork. Inspectors see what people want them to see. I need to see what happens when they think no one important is watching. Claire exhaled slowly. "Then I'm placing a legal team and private security nearby." I almost smiled. I expected nothing less. She looked at the video frozen on my screen. "Whoever sent this knew exactly how to get your attention." "Yes," I said, "because they knew what I used to be." 30 minutes later, I stood before the mirror in a cheap uniform. Gray powder brushed through my hair, dirt darkening my hands, my shoulders slightly bent. The man looking back at me was not Edward Whitmore, billionaire. He was Eddie, an old janitor no one would respect. And tonight, at Gate 14, I would find out whether the empire I built still had a soul. By the time I reached Harrington Executive Terminal, the evening sky had turned the color of steel. I pushed my old mop bucket through the glass entrance, wearing Eddie's faded uniform, rubber gloves, and a borrowed limp that made each step look heavier than it felt. The lobby smelled of leather, perfume, and money. Above the polished marble floor, a gold sign pointed toward Gate 14, where the VIP lounge waited behind smoked glass doors. No one stopped to look at me for more than half a second, and that told me enough. In places like this, people did not see workers. They saw moving furniture. A man in a dark navy suit turned from the reception desk and stared at me as if I had dragged mud across his personal carpet. His name tag read, Brandon Pierce, Terminal Operations Manager. Brandon looked about 40, clean-shaven, handsome in the careful way men become when they practice smiling in mirrors. His hair was perfect, his shoes were polished, and his eyes were empty of warmth. He walked toward me slowly, holding a tablet in one hand, his expression already deciding who I was before I opened my mouth. "You must be the temp cleaner," he said. "Try not to frighten the guests." I lowered my head and made my voice rough. "Yes, sir, Eddie." Brandon glanced at the name patch on my chest, then at my gloves, then at the mop bucket. He did not ask who sent me. He did not verify my paperwork. He simply saw an old man in dirty clothes and assumed I belonged at the bottom. "Gate 14, he said, pointing toward the VIP lounge. "There's a spill near the champagne bar. Clean it quickly, quietly, and do not speak to anyone unless spoken to. These people pay more for one flight than you probably make in a year." A few guests nearby heard him. One man smirked. A woman in pearls looked away, pretending she had not enjoyed it. I pushed the bucket toward Gate 14, feeling every camera, every glance, every silence. The lounge opened before me like a private kingdom. Leather chairs, crystal glasses, silver trays, pilots waiting beside executives, and travelers who looked annoyed by the existence of anyone without a boarding pass printed on thick paper. I knelt beside the champagne bar and began wiping a spill that was barely there. Brandon stood behind me with his arms crossed, making a performance of supervision. "Slower than I expected," he said loudly. "But I suppose we can't ask for miracles." I kept my head down. The old anger inside me wanted to stand up. The investigator in me knew better. That was when I noticed her, Maya Brooks, according to the badge clipped to her gray security uniform. She was a young black woman, maybe 27, with alert brown eyes, her natural hair pinned back neatly, and a posture that said she had learned to stay calm in rooms that underestimated her. She was stationed near the lounge entrance, watching the crowd with professional focus. But when her gaze landed on me, it sharpened. She did not look at my torn sleeves or dirty gloves the way Brandon had. She looked at my shoulders, my hands, my eyes. For one dangerous second, I wondered if she saw through me. Maya's expression changed only slightly, but I had spent a lifetime reading rooms. She knew something was wrong. Later, I would learn she was raising her 16-year-old brother, Noah Brooks, a quiet honor student who still kept their father's old police badge in a drawer after he died in the line of duty. Maya could not afford mistakes. She needed this job, the insurance, the steady paycheck, the promise that Noah might have a future better than grief. So she said nothing. She only watched me while Brandon treated me like dirt, and in her eyes I saw the first sign that Gate 14 was hiding more than bad manners. I was still wiping the same invisible spill when the first shout cut through Gate 14. It came from the far end of the VIP lounge near a private seating area reserved for passengers flying to Aspen. A tall man in a cream cashmere coat stood over a glass table, patting his sleeves and pockets with rising panic. His name was Preston Vale, a real estate investor in his late 50s with silver hair, a sharp jaw, and the kind of voice that expected doors to open before he reached them. Beside him, a half-empty glass of bourbon trembled in his hand. "My watch," he snapped. "My diamond Patek is gone." The lounge shifted instantly. Conversations died. Heads turned. A woman gasped as if a crime against jewelry was worse than a crime against a person. Preston raised his wrist for everyone to see the pale circle where the watch had been. $250,000, he said, each word louder than the last. "It was right here 10 minutes ago." Brandon Pierce appeared almost too quickly, his expression arranged into professional concern. "Mr. Vale, please stay calm. We'll handle this immediately." But his eyes did not search the room. They went straight to me. I felt the moment before he spoke. The performance had begun. Brandon turned slowly, letting the room follow his gaze until every set of wealthy eyes landed on the old janitor kneeling by the champagne bar. "Eddie," he said, with a careful softness that made the accusation sound polite. "You were cleaning in this section, weren't you?" I kept my face dull, my shoulders rounded. Yes, sir. Preston stared at me with disgust already forming. Check him, he demanded. People like that don't wander into places like this by accident. Brandon lifted one hand, pretending restraint. Let's not jump to conclusions, he said, while pushing everyone toward exactly that conclusion. Across the lounge, Maya Brooks moved toward the security station built into the side wall. She did not rush. That was the first smart thing she did. A guilty person hurries. A trained guard stays measured. From where I knelt, I saw her unlock the camera console and review the last 15 minutes of footage. Her face remained controlled, but her jaw tightened. On the screen, I caught a reflection of what she was watching. Brandon speaking quietly near the service corridor with a young attendant in a white jacket. The attendant was Logan Reed, a nervous man in his early 30s with sandy hair, tired eyes, and a service smile that cracked whenever Brandon looked at him. Logan kept rubbing his palms against his pants, nodding too quickly as Brandon leaned close. In the footage, Brandon's body blocked the camera for several seconds. Then Logan walked toward Preston's seating area, carrying a tray of fresh glasses. Maya rewound the clip, watched again, and this time her eyes flicked toward Brandon. She had not found proof of theft, not yet, but she had found something worse than chance. She had found coordination. Logan looked less like a thief and more like a man being moved across a chessboard by someone who knew exactly where the cameras could not see. Brandon clapped his hands once, loud enough to reclaim the room. For everyone's comfort, we'll conduct a quick internal search. His smile landed on me like a blade. Starting with the temporary cleaning staff. I lowered my head as if fear had swallowed my voice, but inside, every detail sharpened. Preston's missing watch, Brandon's convenient timing, Logan's panic, Maya's silent discovery. This was no ordinary accusation. It was a trap being built in public, and the easiest man in the room to bury was the one everyone had already decided was worthless. Brandon did not give Maya time to finish reviewing the footage. He stepped behind the security console and placed one hand on the back of her chair, close enough to remind her who controlled the terminal. "Officer Brooks," he said, his voice smooth and cold, "escort Eddie to the security office and begin an incident report." I stood near the champagne bar with two guests watching me like I might run. Maya's eyes moved from Brandon to me, then back to the frozen camera screen. She understood the order for what it was. Once I entered that office, Brandon could pressure me, isolate me, and turn suspicion into paperwork. Maya nodded, but before she closed the footage window, her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. A deleted segment had reappeared in the system cache, only 3 seconds long, but 3 seconds was enough. On the grainy image, Logan Reed walked past Preston Vale's table with a silver tray. His hand dipped low. A flash of diamonds disappeared beneath a folded napkin. Then Brandon's reflection appeared in the dark glass behind him, watching from the service corridor. Logan had taken the watch, but not like a thief. He moved like a man following orders he hated. Maya's face did not change, but something in her eyes hardened. "Problem?" Brandon asked. Maya closed the screen before he could lean closer. "No, sir. I'll take him now." She stepped toward me with one hand resting near her radio. "Come with me," she said. Her voice was firm enough for the room, but her eyes carried a warning she could not speak. As we crossed the lounge, Brandon followed at a distance, pretending to check messages on his tablet while watching every movement. Cameras covered the ceiling. Guests watched from leather chairs. Even the bartender had stopped polishing glasses. Maya could not accuse Brandon out loud, not here, not while he still owned the narrative. Halfway to the security corridor, Maya paused beside a small coffee station. "He looks faint," she said, glancing back at Brandon. "I'm getting him water." Brandon rolled his eyes. "Make it quick." Maya turned her body just enough to block the nearest camera with her shoulder. Instead of water, she picked up a paper coffee cup, slipped something beneath the lid, and pressed it into my gloved hands. Her fingers brushed mine for less than a second. "Hold this," she said. To anyone watching, it looked like a guard keeping an old man steady. To me, it felt like someone had just stepped between a loaded gun and my chest. Inside the security office, Maya kept her distance and pointed me toward a chair. Brandon stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smiling like a man waiting for a confession he had already written. I lowered my head and slowly lifted the coffee lid. Tucked against the rim was a small folded paper. I opened it beneath the table. The handwriting was tight and hurried. "Don't sign anything. They planted the watch. Brandon is setting you up." I read it once, then again. I did not look at Maya immediately. That would have betrayed her. Instead, I let my face remain tired, frightened, ordinary. But inside, everything had changed. Maya Brooks had just risked her badge, her paycheck, her brother's future, and whatever safety she had left in that terminal, to warn a man she believed was powerless. I had come to Gate 14 looking for corruption. I had found it. But I had also found something rarer: courage with no audience, truth spoken in secret, and a woman brave enough to protect a stranger while standing directly under the eye of the man who could destroy her. I folded the note into my palm and stayed silent. For now, silence was the only way to keep her safe. Brandon Pierce noticed the coffee cup before he noticed the note. That was the danger with men like him. They rarely saw kindness, but they always recognized disobedience. His eyes narrowed as I sat in the security office, both hands wrapped around the cup Maya had given me. He looked at her, then at me, then back at her again. The smile on his face thinned into something sharper. "Officer Brooks," he said softly, "step outside with me." Maya did not move at first. She stood near the desk, calm on the surface, but I could see the tension in her fingers. She knew he had understood enough. I stayed in the chair with my head lowered, playing the frightened old janitor Brandon wanted everyone to see. Through the glass wall of the security office, I watched him lead Maya back into the VIP lounge. He did not confront her privately. He wanted an audience. Preston Vale was still pacing near the champagne bar, demanding updates. Guests whispered behind crystal glasses. Staff hovered at the edges of the room, pretending to work while waiting to see who would be sacrificed. Brandon raised his voice just enough to command attention. "Everyone, I apologize for the delay. Unfortunately, this situation has become more serious." Maya's face remained still, but her eyes flicked once toward me. Brandon pointed at her with theatrical disappointment. "Officer Brooks has violated protocol. She made unauthorized contact with the suspect and may have attempted to interfere with an active investigation." A quiet shock passed through the lounge. Preston turned on her immediately. "Are you saying she helped him?" Brandon sighed as if the accusation pained him. "At this stage, we have reason to believe she may have coordinated with the cleaning contractor to conceal stolen property." There it was. In one sentence, Maya was no longer the officer doing her job. She was the traitor. For the first time, her composure cracked. "That is not true," she said. "I followed your order." Brandon stepped closer, lowering his voice but not enough to hide it. "You gave him something." Maya's jaw tightened. "A drink. He looked unwell." "A drink," Brandon repeated, smiling at the crowd. "How generous, how convenient." Then he turned toward the staff gathered near the service corridor. "Effective immediately, Maya Brooks is suspended pending a full internal review. Surrender your badge, radio, and access card." The words landed like a public execution. I saw her hand move toward the badge on her chest, then stop. No one in that room knew what that badge meant to her. But I had learned enough from watching her. Maya was not only protecting herself, she was carrying a family. Her 16-year-old brother Noah had a tuition deposit due for the academy program that might get him into college. Her mother, Denise Brooks, a former school librarian with gentle eyes and failing vision, needed eye surgery that insurance would only partially cover. Maya's paycheck was not comfort. It was the wall between her family and collapse. Brandon knew that too. Men like him always studied where people were weakest before they pressed. Near the service corridor, Logan Reed stood frozen with a tray in his hands. His face had gone pale. He knew Maya had done nothing wrong. He knew the watch had been planted because he had been the one forced to take it. But Brandon had something on him too. Records of old gambling debts Logan had hidden from his wife. Debts Brandon had quietly paid just to own him later. Logan's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Maya, ashamed, then lowered his eyes. Brandon held out his hand for Maya's badge. The whole lounge waited for her to break. She did not. She removed it slowly and placed it in his palm. Brandon's hand closed around Maya's badge like he had just won something. He looked almost pleased with himself, standing in the center of Gate 14 while everyone watched the young security officer lose the job that held her family together. Maya kept her chin lifted, but I saw the hurt behind her eyes. I had seen that look before, on my mother's face in the snow, on workers who knew the truth but had no power to prove it. Brandon turned the badge over in his palm and said, "You made a very poor choice, Officer Brooks." That was when I stood up. The room shifted toward me. To them, I was still Eddie, the old janitor accused of stealing a diamond watch, the easiest man in the terminal to dismiss. I walked slowly out of the security office and into the VIP lounge. Brandon's eyes flashed with irritation. "Sit down," he ordered. I did not. Instead, I reached for the fingers of my right glove and pulled it off one slow inch at a time. The rubber snapped softly against my wrist. Then I removed the left glove. Underneath, my hands were clean, steady, and nothing like the trembling hands of a frightened old man. "No," I said. "I think I have sat quietly long enough." Brandon laughed once, but it came out thin. "You are making this worse for yourself." I turned toward the mop bucket beside the champagne bar. Built into the lower compartment, behind a loose plastic panel, was a small phone that had been recording since the moment I entered the terminal. I pressed my thumb to the screen and sent the signal Claire had been waiting for. Then I placed the phone on the glass table where everyone could see it. "Actually," I said, "you have been making it worse for yourself for the last 40 minutes. The lounge went silent enough for me to hear ice shifting in Preston Vale's bourbon glass. The doors to Gate 14 opened less than 30 seconds later. Claire Bennett entered first, calm and precise in a charcoal suit, her sharp eyes scanning the room like she had already measured every threat inside it. Behind her came two attorneys from Whitmore Aviation Group, a private security team in dark jackets, and Margaret Ellis, a silver-haired board representative known for removing executives without raising her voice. No one in that lounge knew whether to stand, sit, or run. Brandon's face drained of color. Preston Vale lowered his glass. Maya stared at Claire, then at me, beginning to understand that the old janitor was not who he appeared to be. Claire stopped beside me and opened a slim folder. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Legal, security, and the board representative are present." Gasps moved through the lounge like wind through dry leaves. I looked at Brandon. "My name is Edward Whitmore. I own Harrington Executive Terminal." A woman who had covered her purse earlier dropped her eyes to the floor. A man who had smirked while Brandon insulted me suddenly became fascinated with his shoes. Their shame arrived too late, but at least it arrived. I picked up the phone and played the first recording. Brandon's voice filled the room, low and unmistakable, instructing Logan Reed to move the watch during tray service and make sure suspicion landed on the old cleaner. Then came Logan's frightened whisper, asking what would happen if Maya checked the cameras. Brandon's answer was colder than I expected. "Then she goes down with him." Maya's face went still. Logan looked like he might collapse. The VIP lounge that had treated my humiliation like entertainment now stood frozen in panic. Brandon opened his mouth, but for once, no lie came quickly enough to save him. My name moved through Gate 14 like a verdict. Edward Whitmore. For a moment, no one breathed. Brandon Pierce stared at me as if the words had struck him harder than any fist could. The old janitor he had mocked, accused, and tried to bury was not a temporary cleaner. I was the new owner of Harrington Executive Terminal, the controlling shareholder of the private airport network his career depended on, and the man whose signature sat above every contract in that building. I looked around the lounge at the stunned faces, then back at Brandon. "You didn't just disrespect a worker tonight," I said. "You exposed a system." Claire Bennett placed another folder on the glass table. Inside were incident reports, guest complaints, insurance claims, and inventory records from the last 18 months. Margaret Ellis, the board representative, stood beside her without expression. "We began reviewing this terminal before tonight," Claire said. The missing watch was not the first luxury item to vanish at Gate 14. I turned the pages slowly so the room could see the pattern. Diamond earrings, designer luggage, rare watches, a sapphire bracelet, cash envelopes, all reported missing after passing through Brandon's lounge. Each time, suspicion landed on a cleaner, a driver, a baggage assistant, or a junior server who could not afford a lawyer. Brandon tried to laugh. "This is insane. Rich people lose things. Staff steal. That's not my fault." But his voice had lost its shine. I nodded toward the attorneys, and one of them placed printed stills from security footage beside the records. The images showed Brandon meeting employees near blind spots, changing camera angles, and signing off on internal reports before outside investigators could review them. "You built a theft ring," I said. "Then you blamed the poorest people in the building because you knew the guests would believe it." Preston Vale's face turned gray. The outrage he had aimed at me now had nowhere clean to go. At the service corridor, Logan Reed finally broke. The tray slipped from his hands and struck the floor with a metallic crash. Everyone turned. Logan was shaking, his eyes red, his voice barely alive when he spoke. "He made me do it," he said. Brandon whipped around. "Shut your mouth." But Logan looked at Maya, then at me, and something in him chose the truth over fear. He knew about my gambling debt. He paid part of it, then told me I owed him. He made me move watches, wallets, jewelry. He said if I refused, he'd fire me and tell my wife everything. It wasn't just me. He used people who were desperate. That confession cracked the room open. A baggage assistant stepped forward and said Brandon had forced him to hide stolen luggage in a maintenance closet. A bartender admitted she had been ordered to distract guests while Logan worked the tables. Maya stood silent, her suspended badge still in Brandon's hand, but her eyes never left him. Every person he had controlled with shame, debt, or fear was now watching his kingdom collapse. Brandon backed away, breathing hard. "You're all liars," he spat, "every one of you." Then he turned and ran toward the private runway exit. He made it 12 steps. My security team intercepted him before he reached the access door, pinning his arms as he struggled and cursed. Outside the glass windows, red and blue lights flashed across the tarmac. The police entered through Gate 14 in full view of the same VIP guests who had laughed at an old janitor less than an hour earlier. Brandon screamed that he had rights, that he would sue, that no one could prove anything. I picked up Maya's badge from where he had dropped it and handed it back to her. "The proof is standing all around you," I said. And as the officers took Brandon Pierce away in handcuffs, Gate 14 finally became silent for the right reason. 3 months after Brandon Pierce was taken away in handcuffs, Harrington Executive Terminal opened its doors again. But it did not feel like the same place. The marble floors still shone, the leather chairs were still expensive, and private jets still waited beyond the glass. Yet the coldness was gone. The new Gate 14 had warmer lights, open desks instead of hidden offices, and signs that welcomed every guest with the same words: "Respect begins here." I stood near the entrance in a dark suit, watching employees greet travelers not with fear, but with confidence. Maya Brooks arrived just before the reopening ceremony, wearing a navy blazer instead of her old security uniform. Her mother, Denise Brooks, walked beside her without the dark glasses she used to wear before surgery. The operation had been a success. Behind them came Noah, Maya's younger brother, standing taller than I remembered, holding the scholarship letter from the new Whitmore Employee Relief Fund. When I offered Maya the position of Director of Guest Integrity, she did not accept immediately. She looked me in the eye and said, "Not unless the people working here have somewhere to turn before desperation makes them easy to control." That condition became the fund that helped her family first, then dozens more. Logan Reed was there too, standing near the service counter in a clean white jacket, his hands folded nervously in front of him. He had testified against Brandon, returned what money he could, and told the truth even when it humiliated him. I did not erase what he had done, but I refused to let Brandon own the rest of his life. Logan was placed in a monitored training program, working under honest supervision, with one clear rule: one more lie, and the chance was over. When Maya passed him, he lowered his head and whispered, "Thank you for not letting me stay a coward." She answered, "Then don't become one again." At the center of Gate 14, we unveiled the only decoration I had personally chosen. It was a glass frame mounted on a stone wall. Inside was the folded note Maya had hidden beneath the coffee lid, the paper still creased from my gloved hand. The words were simple, hurried, and powerful. "Don't sign anything. They planted the watch. Brandon is setting you up." Beneath it, a bronze plaque read, "One quiet warning saved an innocent man and exposed a corrupt empire." As the staff gathered around it, I saw some of them wiping their eyes. Not because the note was beautiful, but because it told them the truth mattered here now. Brandon's verdict came the same morning as the reopening. Claire handed me the message quietly before the ceremony began. "Guilty on fraud." guilty on organized theft, guilty on defamation and conspiracy. Several former employees had their records cleared. 2 families received settlements for careers Brandon had ruined. Preston Vale, the man whose watch had started the final trap, sent a written apology to Maya and donated to the relief fund. It did not undo the damage, but it proved something important. When corruption falls in public, even the people who once looked away are forced to choose what kind of witnesses they want to become. Before the first flight boarded, I stood before the entire staff of Harrington Executive Terminal. Maya stood on my right. Logan stood near the back. Denise and Noah watched from the front row. I looked at the faces in that room: cleaners, guards, pilots, attendants, managers, and I thought of my mother standing in the snow all those years ago. Then I said, in this place, no one will be judged by the clothes they wear. We will judge people by the truth they tell, the courage they show, and the way they treat those with less power. And when the doors of Gate 14 opened, they opened for everyone. That day at Gate 14 taught me something I will never forget. Sometimes God does not send help with thunder, angels, or miracles that shake the sky. Sometimes he sends one brave person with a quiet warning hidden under a coffee lid. Maya could have stayed silent. She could have protected her job, her family, and her own future. But she chose the truth when lying would have been easier. And maybe that is what God asks from all of us: not to be powerful, not to be perfect, but to be brave enough to do the right thing when someone weaker is being crushed. So I want to ask you this. If you had been standing in that lounge, would you have spoken up for Maya? Or would you have stayed silent like everyone else? And if you were Maya, would you have risked everything to save a stranger? Tell me your answer in the comments. I truly want to know what you would have done. And if this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next powerful and unforgettable story.